3, 2, 1.
We will make America great again.
From Studio A in Greenwich, Connecticut, Carl Higbie.
So welcome back to the Carl Higbie Show. I have someone fresh back from the Canadian tundra joining us today. We have had conversations on and off air, and you know what? We disagree on 99% of stuff, but I will say that we've always been respectful to each other. So Sally Kohn, how are you?
Hey, I'm good, Carl. How are you?
How was Canada?
Well, okay, first of all, I didn't go to the tundra. I'd like to say, however, I'm really open to going to the tundra. You know that that there are actually parts of Canada that have
running water?
They're not faring so well, apparently. But and second of all, I don't know that we disagree on 99% of things. We probably, this is interesting. When I was in Canada, I saw an iceberg. It was far off in the distance because they're not doing so well either. But I saw an iceberg because I was in Newfoundland. And apparently, I forget what the ratio is, but like when you see an iceberg, you only literally see the tip of the iceberg. You see maybe a third of the iceberg. The large part of it is underwater. I'm starting to feel like that's the case with our politics, too. Mm-hmm. That maybe you and I disagree about 99% of the tip of the iceberg of what we actually debate and argue about and scream at each other about on television. But if we went below the surface, the vast majority of things, the things we take for granted, we probably agree on. Sorry to break it to you.
Fair enough. Well, so you just to clarify, I view all of Canada is the tundra. I was up there, actually. I was hunting in Nova Scotia. I was bear hunting in Nova Scotia. Not polar bear, but...
legal?
Yeah, of course. Actually, bears up there are like kangaroos in Australia. They're pests. Yeah, they're everywhere.
Black bears, brown bears?
Black bear. And they say that, there's like, oh, well, the Americans will actually come pay to hunt them, so great, we'll let them.
Stupid Americans. Go ahead.
So I went up there and I went.
Did you get one?
Of course, yeah. I'll send you a picture off air. I have it on my wall.
Please do. Don't post that online, mind you.
Oh, it's on my Instagram.
Announce it on your podcast. No one's, but you have it on your wall.
Yeah.
Did you eat the meat? I'm so curious. I'm not a hunter, as you can tell.
Actually, it was funny. I sent you. I put that picture of a moose on Instagram, and I was like, "Oh my God, are you hunting?" And you were like,
"Oh, I know, that was funny. You did do that. That was funny." Yes, I found a moose. My goal was one of my summer goals: see a moose. Saw a moose. It was so cool. Did not kill it, Carl. Sorry to disappoint you. I'm not against hunting, incidentally. I don't mean to sound like I am. It's more that I actually grew up, I grew up in rural Pennsylvania in hunting country. We got the first day of hunting season off. It's just that I have family who hunt. I myself have not done it. I adore meat. It's my favorite food group, but I'm not I just don't know if I could do it. We went fishing. We went fishing, and even that made me a little, like I hadn't gone fishing in a long time, and there were big fish, and so watching even just the fishes, I just said that, throats get cut was a little like,
Okay. That's like my wife.
Happy to eat it.
My wife, she's like, look, I'm never going to go hunting with you, but I love meat.
Right, exactly. I've heard bear is tasty.
It's
never eaten it.
Not great.
Oh.
Yeah.
So then you did this for just the, is this like a testosterone thing? You're like, all right, kill the bear!
Toxic masculinity. Let's go with that.
Got it.
Yeah, no, I did eat some of it.
You just made my whole day saying that. Thank you.
Well, that's why I wanted to have you on, because because of that stuff. So
I'm easy like that. Go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things we were talking about off air is, me as a person, I've moved around the political sphere on social issues specifically, and like, look, you're gay, you're married, correct?
Oh. Interestingly enough, I'm not married. It's a small bone of contention. But yeah, no, it's a long story. Mostly has to do with my actually latent libertarianism, that I would rather the state not get involved in, sanctioning certain relationships over other relationships, and sort of congenital aversion to heteronormativity. But other than that, yay, gay marriage. Sure.
Okay.
Anyway, go on.
Wow. Okay. That libertarian streak. See, you know what?
You never know, right?
I used to be ardently anti-gay marriage, and I was pretty against homosexuality in general due to being molested when I was a kid.
Which I hadn't known about until you told me off air, and I said it then, and I say it now. It's horrible, and I'm sorry you went through that, or were put through that.
Yeah, and me to rationalize that, it took a long time for me to kind of get over the fact that that was a sick person and not all gay people.
Yes.
So this is an issue I've moved pretty far to the middle on here, and I'm kind of the now I'm a live and let live guy, and I see this, and I always said to someone was like, well, what do you think about gay marriage? And if you asked me 6 years ago, I was like, absolutely hell no. If you ask me now, I'm like, look, if straight people get to be miserable, gay people should be too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've been divorced and now I'm remarried. And going through that process, the divorce process, man, like, you know what? Your libertarian streak is probably right on something here.
Well, we're going on. We actually have lost track of how many years. Something like, I don't know, 15 or something. So I all but married, maybe one of these days. But if I do it, I won't tell anyone, so I don't seem like a hypocrite. But what I will say is, it's interesting to me, having written, so I wrote a book about hate.
The opposite of hate.
Yes, thank you. The opposite of hate. And in the book, I talked to ex-neo-Nazis and former terrorists, and I appreciated the reaction. Like, I'll probably get, crap for talking to you. And I get, whatever. I appreciate that. Like, I don't agree with it, but I understand why people get up in arms when, like, Steve Bannon is invited to a conference or whatever. But I was so surprised that people reacted to, they were like, how could you sit down with a former neo-Nazi? And it's like, and it makes me think of the conversation we're having now, because, like what the heck? So Carl Higbee once upon a time wrote some homophobic things. So would you have liked him to stay that way? Like, is that the left's preference? Is like, once a homophobe, always a homophobe, and we're going to ostensibly condemn you to
for
always
life.
be that by never giving you the space and invitation to change.
Mm-hmm.
I call myself a progressive, and for all the complexity that means, what it ultimately means is I believe in and support progress, and that includes people progressing and changing. So I just want to say, I think that's fantastic.
Well,
I wish
thanks.
more people would follow your lead.
Well, thanks. Well, I appreciate it. I mean, and the other thing, too, is I've been beaten very badly over the racist things. And so, I said some racy comments. I wouldn't call them racist. And, it's funny because I've been attacked by the hard left on this, actually mostly white liberals, but that have said, well, you're racist, Carl. And I ask them, I've asked them point blank, well, like, yes, I've said some things that are very controversial and very racial in nature, but not racist in intent, and I asked them, I said, so you're taking 30 seconds out of my past from 5 years ago and overlaying it over the fact that I served in the most diverse military in the world. I served, during my summers in high school, I did mission trips to Central America, or the fact that I was the face of national community service for the federal government. So I talk to people and they're like, well, I didn't know that, or something like that. And it's interesting that this divide we're on right now.
Well, Carl, I think there's two pieces to this. One is we are in the midst, and it does just seem to be getting worse. And this is certainly fueled by social media, fueled by our attention economy, with our shorter and shorter attention spans, the way media is playing into that and or being driven by that. There's all these factors that are kind of creating a rush to judgment culture, sometimes in ways that are justified, right? Like, I think a lot of what fuels Me Too is, and I'm sure your experience might align with this, a frustration that historically certain injustices and facts of injustice were ignored, overlooked, brushed aside. So a lot of it is a legitimate frustration that is bubbling to the surface. And we also have this intense divisiveness and this intense partisanship. And a whole set of other kinds of politics that say, like, well, if someone on my side makes this accusation, I'm going to believe them. But if someone on that side does the same thing, I'm going to condemn them. And so I think there's that. I also think we are really crappy as a country, and as white people in particular, in talking about race. And
I'm not polished on it, as you can tell.
Sorry?
I said I'm not polished on it, as you can tell from the headlines.
No, well, but I mean, first of all, we aren't, because as white people, we've been told that the way to talk about race is to ignore it, and if you don't ignore it, then what you do is you say, I don't see it. And, look.
Yeah, actually, I agree with you on that.
In my evidence, the evidence is all around us that race is I mean, we see disproportionate policing, we see differences in income, in educational attainment. Like there's evidence that, well, that doesn't mean we like it. It doesn't mean I'm saying yay.
Well, so you're saying that's evidence of racism or evidence of racial inequality?
Well, there we go. Evidence of racial inequality fueled. Now we can argue about where that comes from, but I believe fueled by racial bias. I mean, look, when you say you look at differences in terms of educational attainment, in terms of income for the same job, levels of being pulled over, same driver, same cars, same crime, same preponderance of crime in communities, but more likely to be pulled over, detained, arrested. Same crime, you're sentenced, you're convicted, but you get a harsher sentence if you're black. Like, you look at these things over and over again, and I'm sure you and I could argue till the cows come home about this, but I would think at least one variable, we could agree, if not the dominant variable, I would argue, is a latent bias baked into the history of this country and our institutions and our people. Now, where I would diverge from what you said is, I think one of the challenges we have in talking about race is that what we tend to do is go to these sort of explicit, like, you said something racist, you, Carl, are a racist. I actually don't think that's a helpful conversation.
I agree.
Because I think in the reality of racism today, the reality and the far more pernicious problem is the inequalities in the education system, the ways that we know teachers or people who are doing hiring or banks doing lending, that these biases, and it's not like there's somebody who is a secret KKK wannabe who goes into these schools and causes these problems, right? It's a cultural, institutional, systemic phenomenon, and we don't know how to talk about that. We only know how to say, you're a racist, Carl, so that I can feel better about I'm not.
Yeah.
And the problems are bigger, and the problems actually include all of us.
So do you think, now, since we're on this, we weren't originally going to talk about this, but this is great for two white people to discuss this. Do you think some of that is systematically like kind of a perpetual motion, like you have, socioeconomic differences in, different races and versus, the fact that there is, within the black community, and I'm not saying this to denigrate, I'm saying this out of concern, which is 70% of black children are born out of wedlock in this country and are raised and the majority of those are raised in single-parent homes. Do you think that has something to do with it and it perpetuates the cycle in itself, or is it society that is at fault?
Well, look, I think one of the great things about us as human beings is we're complicated people, and we can hold
I'm real simple. Food,
right.
hunting.
but one person's story, one person's example, whatever. I will tell you two things that make me think we have a problem that is about systemic, institutional sort of bias across the board.
I like how you said bias and not racist.
Right. So the two things. One, when we talk about the problems of drugs and crime and drug-related crime in our inner cities in places like Chicago,
mm-hmm.
we, including the media, certainly folks on the center-right, tend to talk about the cultural problems or failings of the black community.
Mm-hmm.
When we, white people, the media, the center-right, talk about drugs, crime, and drug-related crime in the Rust Belt, in Appalachia, and rural white America,
mm-hmm.
tend to talk about things like failure of manufacturing. Maybe we talk about the pharmaceutical industry pushing opioids, et cetera, et cetera. It's the we talk about the opioid crisis as in it's a what do we do to help? We need to help these communities that are suffering, as opposed to blaming them. We don't blame poor white communities in the way that we blame poor black communities. So there's right there, very similar circumstances, people suffering under poverty, lack of jobs, with an influx of drugs, related crime. We talk about them in two entirely different ways. Problem number one. Example number one. Example number two. You take the exact same resume. This study's been repeated over and over and over again. Take the exact same resume, exact same. Put a white-seeming name on the top of it. Put a black-seeming name on the top of it. The resume with the white name will get twice as many callbacks for interviews. There are no other variables that have been changed. Blind research been repeated over and over again. So, yeah, we could parse out, but like what we're talking about there is, and again, I'm not saying that doesn't mean that the people who are participating in those studies, deciding on those resumes or whatever, or the people who some of those studies they actually just send them to real jobs and right. I'm not saying those people are like sitting there like I am a racist and I want to right. It's look when you
stereotyping.
Live. Well, it's listen. It's the world we're in. We're a country that was founded based on the premise of racial inequality.
Whoa!
Literally, we built our country, and we've never addressed it.
I'm gonna push back on that.
In a fish of water, you're gonna breathe it in.
Yeah, but we were not found. I mean, granted, slavery played a huge part of the development of this country, but we were not founded on that. We were founded on the basis of a don't tax me. That we fought a revolutionary war over a 2% tax hike and a breakfast beverage. We were founded on freedom, and look. Slavery was wrong. Slavery always has been wrong. And slavery has been used throughout history. We're just the first country to fight a civil war amongst the what I will say is the ruling class to free and end slavery. And I applaud that effort. I mean, slavery, nothing good has come from slavery. But at the same time, I don't think it's fair to say that America was founded on that type of oppression. Would you say?
Well, look, I think I love this country. I certainly have.
What are you doing vacationing in Canada?
We were in Maine for a month too, Carl.
Oh, okay.
I certainly haven't served it and given my life to this country in the way that you have, for which I'm grateful. And I think America has always been a complicated place, and it's just a reality, right? Yes, we're a nation of paradox. We were founded by people who were supposedly looking for freedom and liberty and who got their land by ostensibly perpetrating a genocide against First Peoples. I mean, there's no, let's not, right? And the reason that could be justified was out of a false belief that these people coming from Europe, these white folks, were superior. And then when the country that was supposedly all about freedom and equality and liberty, and which I believe in, was created, enshrined in that creation, and actually the both conceptual and the way that the country was built physically, violated those principles in indoctrinating and perpetuating slavery. So we've always, that is, and I don't say that, to bash America. I say that to see America with clear eyes.
Yeah.
And then recognize that you can't have a history like that.
Yeah.
And then wipe it under the rug and pretend it doesn't exist. It wasn't that long ago that we still had, we're talking like, a half century, we still had legal segregation in this country. That doesn't go, that leaves an imprint in our economy, our politics. Yes.
And there's people alive today that witness that. I mean, that it sucks. It does. And I don't advocate for that. But nowadays I see the self-segregation of certain groups on college campuses or in society. And I'm like, where are we going with this? Like, what I look at is like, what is the solution? And if, this brings us directly into the next topic of, one of the things you put up on Instagram the other day, yesterday, about the Kavanaugh hearings. And I'm staring at a picture of two black U.S. senators, Cory Booker and Kamala Harris, and they are sitting there, and you said, there are heroes among us. Martin Luther King once said, one has the moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. The same is true of unjust rules, like Trump White House and Senate Republicans abusing their authority to hide 100,000 plus documents from the American people about the man nominated for a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court. Thank you, Kamala Harris and Cory Booker. And so we have two people here that did this, and Cory Booker, I genuinely believe that that was a 2020 stunt. I don't think it had anything to do with the fact that he was trying to make news for the stunt. Kamala Harris is trying to do the same stuff. What is your opposition, and why you support their opposition to Kavanaugh? What is your opposition to Kavanaugh?
Well, first of all, let me just say what and this is one of these things where you're like, come on. We have seen it's like less than 5% of his record, over 100,000 pages of his record redacted. That's not. I don't care if it's a Republican, a Democrat who's nominating, who's controlling. That's undemocratic. It's undemocratic. And I am old enough to remember when Republicans tried to hammer Obama over lack of transparency. And I am old enough to remember when, Republicans were, going nuts because Nancy Pelosi said with Obamacare was so big and nobody had time to read it. We'd have to wait to pass it to see what's in it. And that's just a law that can be repealed, as you very well know, because you all keep trying to do it. We're talking about a lifetime appointment and confidential documents that have been made confidential. And by a White House that, decides to control controversy, not directly by confronting it and being factual, but rather just by obscuring the truth from the American people. So for me, it's that, right? Separate from whatever you think about Kavanaugh. I like the process. One of the things I like about the Democrats, I respect about the Democrats, is unlike, it was Republicans who denied Obama the Supreme Court appointment. That was how our democracy worked.
But it was unprecedented. It was unprecedented historically to appoint a Supreme Court justice in your last year of office.
But that's not true. And so the point is all the Democrats want to do is have the American people be able to see the information that, and we've seen with some of the ones that have now been released. By the way, we saw the Bush White House lawyer condone the release of the documents, or some of the documents, and we've seen with the ones that they're not.
Well, the Bush White House was.
There's nothing at stake. It's just that they're embarrassing to Kavanaugh in the White House. Or boo-hoo. The American people should know this, and the White House should feel secure enough in their nominee to be transparent.
So here's the thing, too, is I want two issues there. Is one, that there was a SCIF opened up, a secure facility for Democrats or anybody to go review documents, and not one Democrat came until they were called out on TV. The second thing is, going back to history, there are no Supreme Court justices, to my knowledge, that have ever been appointed in the last year of any presidency. Am I wrong about that?
I believe you're wrong. But, we could go back and forth and argue that. Because I haven't argued about Merrick Garland in a few years, so I forget the exact record. I know that both sides have a case to make, and they can say, but come on, even just if so, can you imagine if the shoes had been reversed, and if before Republicans had pulled that crap on Obama, Democrats tried to pull that crap on George Bush? You'd be arguing the opposite side, and that's the problem. The problem is that we've started putting party light years ahead of principle, where we basically suggest there's different rules for your side than for my side. It was bad when my president was not transparent, but it's justifiable when your president isn't, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not the way it should work.
Okay,
we should have the information that we need, apart from the concerns about, this is a lifetime appointment. This matters.
Yeah, but what also matters, look, the Democratic Party was ardently opposed to the release of Clinton's emails, the 30,000 emails that were never released, yet they wanted to put her in the presidency. Yet now they're frustrated about some documents, 100,000 plus, as your thing says. I think somebody made the point it was as high as 1 million. I don't know what these documents are, but there's been more documents released on him than the last 3 Supreme Court justices combined. Now, that doesn't mean there's not more out there.
Now you're talking about
We're talking about what?
volume versus percentage.
Oh, yeah. So, right. So,
all right. First of all, 1/3 of all U.S. presidents appointed a Supreme Court justice in an election year. That is according to the Washington Post. Maybe you don't believe it, but I'm just saying. Like, obviously there is precedent. So, but we're not talking about Merrick Garland now. We're talking about Kavanaugh, and we're talking about the percentage of the documents. I mean, obviously he had an extensive career, but we saw Elena Kagan when she was also in the White House, served in a similar-ish capacity, and we have 99% of her documents and record were made public during her nomination. For Kavanaugh, it's about 4% that have been posted, that have been made public. 4%.
Well, some of those documents that they're claiming are his documents are actually President Bush's documents that may have passed across his desk, but are not exactly his, his documents. So this is
comparing apples to apples. We're talking Elena Kagan's emails she was copied on, emails she wrote. Emails that she was in, correspondence memos, internal memos that she was involved in. We're talking. This is comparing apples to apples. 99% of Elena Kagan's record versus 4% of Kavanaugh's that's been made public. Yes. I'm just saying, like, that's not. And again, I would hope you'd be. If the shoes were reversed, you'd be saying the same thing.
Look, I think everything should be made public. I think it should be, everything should be transparent on this. But I will say that the fact to me that there was such pushback and to hide Hillary Clinton's emails, yet now they want all these documents on the other person. Like that is apples to apples. I mean, it is a strong hypocrisy on the.
Because the American people get to vote. I mean, the difference is that the American, you got to vote. You got to vote. And so maybe you say the emails, maybe that's part of the reason she lost. Like, the American people had to say so. And the issue there was actually that she used a private server, and where did the emails go? And it was about the destruction of the emails. Like, that was the story. Trust me, I know, because I had to talk about it every day for like a year. This is about the actual content of the emails that people have, and that the Trump White House is purposefully withholding for reasons we don't know. But it includes incredibly vital information, like, does the man we're considering appointing to a lifetime appointment on the Supreme Court believe that a president should be immune from criminal prosecution?
Yeah.
That matters. And believe me, I know you think it matters, because I swear, if Hillary Clinton were president, you sure heck would like to have Supreme Court justices who believe that presidents can face criminal prosecution. So it's like, at a certain point, this can't be about right versus left and Democrat versus Republican. This actually has to be about our republic.
Okay.
And whether it functions, and whether we have an independent judiciary that the Senate and we the people can actually know who we're putting in a lifetime role.
So to get it down to the bottom of it, though, do you think it was right of Cory Booker to violate Senate rules to release those documents?
Well, it turns out apparently he had permission, he had been given permission by the Bush White House lawyer, so it's unclear whether he did violate the rules or not. And honestly, I haven't followed. Some people are saying, well, this one document was, this one document wasn't.
A lot of hearsay.
But again, I mean, look, I think what I appreciate is it was done in a. And by the way, there's a lot being made about there were liberal protesters who were disrupting the Kavanaugh hearings. Well, over at the other end of Congress, where, executives from Twitter and Facebook were testifying, there were conservative protesters who were shouting in the middle of those hearings about how they were biased against conservatives. So, but what I appreciate is, I think as members of Congress, senators should uphold decorum and decency. They were respectful and civil in their insistence. But, look, they're doing the work of the democracy. And it was also Thomas Jefferson who said that if there is an unjust law, you have I'm paraphrasing, but you have an obligation not just to, not only should you fight against it, but you have an obligation to. And I think that is, they swore an oath.
Yeah.
They didn't swear an oath to their committee chairman. They swore an oath on the Constitution.
I believe that was Adams, too, said should the laws become so arduous that they cannot be comprehended, they become irrelevant. I think it was the same speech.
But same concept.
Yeah.
I mean, there's also a Jefferson quote. Regardless, look, I think it's, and again, I'm pretty sure that if the situation were reversed, and it was some Republican senator who'd done this, he'd be hailed. There'd be pieces in Daily Caller and Fox News heralding him as a hero.
Okay. So, I mean, the end of your post is #BringIt. So I'm anxious to see where these hearings go to today and, throughout the rest of the, once it gets out of committee. But prediction here, he gets confirmed, yes?
Well, he's already contradicted himself in his testimony, right? He said that Roe versus Wade is settled law. And then
it's not.
Email surfaced in which he wanted to in a anti-abortion op-ed that was being drafted by Bush White House officials that said that Roe versus Wade, correctly said Roe versus Wade is settled law. Kavanaugh took the proactive step of saying, no, let's change that because it isn't. And so that's directly contradicting his sworn testimony in front of the Senate. So either you're concerned about what he's saying, which is, and I think a lot of people are watching this, even people who have concerns about abortion, but who do not want to see us go back to the era of illegal back alley abortions. I think a lot of people are watching this and saying, wait a second, this really could lead to an overturning of Roe versus Wade. Either way, I think the idea that a Supreme Court justice is a potential Supreme Court justice is contradicting himself in testimony is disturbing. The idea that a potential Supreme Court justice, in his testimony yesterday, referred to some forms of contraception as abortion-inducing, which is not only medically inaccurate, but parroting the talking points of groups who would like to not only overturn the legality of abortion, but overturn the legality of contraception, which more than 9 out of 10 American women use. Like these are, and so this is why his record is important.
Yeah, but he's
important.
He's been confirmed before. I mean, I think he's gonna get 54 votes. Because you've got Heidkamp and Manchin and the gang in the red states that are going to have to vote for him.
Look, first of all, you know me. I've fought the good fight for a long time, even when it wasn't a winnable fight. But I actually think this one is, and partly it's because he is contradicting himself. He is saying some deeply disturbing and unjudicial things. By the way, appointment to a federal bench is different than a lifetime Supreme Court appointment. We know that. The bar is higher. It should be.
Yeah.
He has been nominated by a ridiculously unpopular president, at this point the most unpopular president in modern history, who is facing some significant potential legal challenges, which this judge's position is implicated in. And we haven't even really gotten into in the hearings yet.
Yeah, but I mean, let's be honest here. Trump is not. They've been after him for almost 2 years now, and they have yet to find anything related to Russian collusion, which is what they started the investigation for.
But let's not move Russian collusion aside. Let's just talk about campaign finance violations. I mean, the point is, it matters if you have
every
Supreme
president
Court justice
has screwed up campaign finance.
That matters. But the point is, it matters. Whether you think he did it or I think he did, doesn't. What matters is, at this point, and it matters more. It's 5 years ago it might have been hypothetical. Now it is suddenly not so hypothetical. If you have Supreme Court justices who believe the president is above the law, it matters. And I think Maybe it doesn't matter to you, Carl, but I think it matters to the American people. And I think it matters. It matters more. And I think also the Republicans are in an incredibly tough. I don't envy Republicans right now. They've hitched their wagon to, I don't know what the metaphor here is. I don't know about wagon hitches, but they hitched their wagon to
on
a
the
wagon
MAGA train.
Coming apart at the seams.
I totally disagree.
And
I think this president is doing the best job of any recent president. Maybe not immediately, but 20 years from now, people will look back and be like, "Damn, Trump was a great president."
Seriously, Carl?
I do. I mean, you know me, Sally. I've been on the MAGA train since literally like day -1, and
I know. But the fact that, like, come on, let's talk about the op-ed. Let's talk about.
I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to get into that real quick. So yes, let's go there.
Tell me how on earth you think the idea that, like, I mean, just okay. Can I pick one?
Yeah.
Just the cozying up with Russia and autocratic powers, and as much as you clearly do not like Canada, alienating Canada, Germany.
It's not that I don't like
France.
him. It's just America's better than everyone else.
I got that. I mean, I don't get it, but you get that. I got it. Right. But I feel like I know enough about your foreign policy sentiments and your sort of realpolitik sense of the world to be disturbed by that, no?
No, see, here's the thing is, I give Trump the benefit of the doubt on everything. If he says something nice about Vladimir Putin, I want to know what he's doing. Well, I don't want to know because I don't need to know about what he's doing behind the scenes. I want to know what the end result is. And if the end result is good and all I have to hear about him say that, oh yeah, Putin's not such a bad guy, we can get along, I would rather him say that publicly and take some heat for it and then have an ultimate end result that is good. And I give him the benefit of the doubt. Like, look, Trump's not in bed with the Russians. He's just not. And, there's been no evidence to suggest that. And
I'm not talking about collusion. So I just mean literally that at this moment in time, our country, under Trump, he seems to be pursuing better relations with countries like Russia than, like, our relationship with Russia, it would seem, is better. And our relationship with France and Canada is worse. Like,
well, it's because
it doesn't seem like
here's the thing. You've had
we are cozying up to autocratic nations.
No, but
nations that send spies to other countries to kill people.
Out of line, no doubt. And look, Putin's a thug. He's a KGB guy. Like, he's running that as if he's running a covert operation. I mean, you can't do that. And the problem is, though, there's this two sides. One, We've had massive sanctions on Russia. We've thrown out diplomats, and what the article says is that he was hesitant to. So the thing too is Canada and Mexico have been taking advantage of our trade policies, and they've been getting a lot from us, including being attached to the single country in the world with the military that we do. And I see that as somebody standing up said, enough's enough. We give you stuff. We have trade deficits. We give you foreign aid, or at least used to. It's time to level the playing fields. And you know what? If the relationship has to get worse before it gets better, I'm happy to endure that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, apart from the fact that we could go line by line of NAFTA and look at the ways in which NAFTA was also better for the United States than it was for Mexico and whatever. Apart from that, I'm gonna be a traditionalist in the sense that I like the United States to have strong alliances with, nations that promote democracy. To parrot the conservative language, free people, free money. I mean, I'm a little old school that way. I think we should be on better terms with France than Russia. And, but regardless, the notion that there are people within the administration who see his reckless tweeting, you gotta, do you really think he is just some, mad genius who just understands, he's in over his head. When he met with France, he said, apparently 10 times, he said to Macron, we're going to do a one-on-one trade deal, and 10 times Macron had to explain to him it doesn't work like that, because EU.
Right?
He has no idea what he's talking about, and he's petulant, and he is, being babysat, apparently, by his own team.
I don't see. And they said in that article that he succeeds in spite of himself, not because of himself. And that was something that, look, I think this guy who wrote this is a coward. I did a similar thing. I wrote a book on active duty criticizing Obama when I was a SEAL. The only difference is I put my name on the front cover, and I said the first line in the book is he's my commander-in-chief and I will obey his orders. At no point did I undermine anything. I put out a tweet yesterday that went absolutely viral, which was loyalty is more important than qualifications at this time in the White House. And I think that, you can disagree with his policies all you want, but the guy's done something magical. I mean, he really has. The economy, jobs, what he's done on the world stage, we're starting to be respected again, and the people who don't respect us are starting to fear us, like North Korea, and they're coming to the table. That is something that is no one's...
Wait. Even he admitted that the North Korea's collapsed, and there'll be no more talks. And, what do you mean they're coming to the table?
Well, there'll be no more talks until they make concrete
they one
steps.
foot off, and it's over.
Yeah, but they stopped testing missiles, and they've gotten, for the first time in a long time, the North and South have come together and met and had talk. I mean, this is not something that happens overnight.
You know what, Carl? I mean, obviously time will only tell, but listen, there's some level at which, on this, we will never see eye to eye.
Never.
Even if I were, I guess I can try to imagine if I were a conservative, but how I might feel, and I think that you're right. The point of that essay, and I also, by the way, said the person who wrote it was a coward, because what they're basically saying is we like what we're getting from this White House in terms of core conservative policy, but we don't think Trump is conservative enough, and he is impetuous and impulsive and all these, and so that's why we're complaining. But you like cutting food stamps to give tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires and corporations, and you like slashing clean air and clean water regulations. So
yeah, but we have the clean air and clean water. Let's be honest. Paris, which was one of the dirtiest cities in the world, is the origin of the Paris Climate Accord, at least the locale of the signing. It's America produces.
The difference is, are you trying to be part of the problem or deny that there's a problem?
But we put out far less carbon emissions than anybody else in the Paris Climate Accord per capita. So
okay. So, I think I listen. I also think the idea, I'm a little horrified that you think that qualifications are, I might as well be Treasury Secretary, right? I mean, if I were loyal to Trump, I could be Treasury Secretary. I understand that there's a sort of piece of conservative orthodoxy about bashing government to the point where you can then drown it in a bathtub. I got that. I mean, I don't agree with it. Yeah. But, dear Lord, you were in the military. You must think that to be a soldier, qualifications matter. And to your point, I mean, right? Doesn't it matter? You don't want me on your SEAL team.
So that is actually, and I'm going to address that, but the comparison to that is completely different. You're talking about an innate skill of using a physical weapon or something like that. What I want is people in the White House, and I say, look, you have all these people with all these alleged qualifications that have been in government for all these years that, quite frankly, Republican or Democrat, have gotten us to this crap show that we're in now. And, $20 trillion in debt and, all these problems that we have with global conflict in Iraq and Afghanistan. We got there not just because one party or the other, but we got there because of, quote, experienced people that served in either side of the aisle. And I want someone who's going to come in there with a business aspect like Trump, which is why he got elected, because he's not, look, Trump's not perfect, but he's perfect for me. And he comes in there with good ideas, with a business perspective of slash and burn the stuff that doesn't work and fix and the stuff that does work, make it stronger. And I respect that. And I want people in there, look, if there's a mistake to be made, great. Let the president own it, but do not undermine him. I believe that to be treason. If you're going to undermine the very administration that you're working for and remove documents from his desk. I
don't think it's, can I ask a question? When Nixon was at the end of his, term, right, as he was,
resigning,
kind of losing it, and before he resigned, he was apparently erratic, drinking. Did you think? Would you have called it treason that his senior staff had sort of given the order that, before he could, for instance, launch the nuclear codes, they had to run it by Kissinger. I mean, is that treasonous, you think?
I don't think that's treasonous because they're not taking pieces of paper off his desk. And now if you have somebody who's drinking, and Trump doesn't drink. You're
interfering with the commandments of the commander-in-chief. You are actually giving an order to the military as not commander-in-chief and saying, hey, if the commander-in-chief goes to use the nuclear codes, don't let him.
Invoke the 25th
You don't think
Amendment.
That's treason, but taking some paper without invoking the 25th Amendment, you haven't done it. I mean, I'm just saying, again...
It's one thing if your president is drunk.
It doesn't matter, because you happen to apparently think the sun rises and falls on Donald Trump, and I happen to think he is a tragedy, a reflection of our worst impulses and fears, and the idea...
I love
the idea that we can solve our problems by attacking, demeaning, and bemoaning others. By the way, I happen to think this country was already great. And you seem to, too, because you don't like Canada. And our economy is doing pretty well, and all the world's problems are not our fault, and there are things that work really great. People like Medicare, and they like Social Security, and my kid goes to a great public school, and when I went on vacation in Maine, I traveled amazing highways and roads, and, I can turn my electricity on. We have things going for us. We can do better. There's no doubt we can do better.
So will you give Trump credit for anything?
Trump credit for anything. Look, I think NAFTA was a awful piece of policy for the American people, for workers, and by the way, for most workers, it was a boon. NAFTA was a boon to global corporations, and so from what I've seen, some of his proposals or his team's proposals to redo NAFTA, I think are a step in the right direction. And by the way, I've said this from the beginning. Anytime he does something I like, I'll support it. I'm glad the clemencies he's given to people facing, near lifetime sentences for nonviolent drug convictions. I support that, without a doubt.
Mm-hmm. Oh, what about jobs?
What about jobs? I like jobs, Carl.
He's done a good job.
Listen. Yeah, he's done a good job. I'm old enough to remember that when I was, the beginning of the Obama administration, I was on Fox then, not CNN. And I'm old enough to remember, Carl, when in the first 2-3 years of the Obama administration, talk about the improving jobs numbers, and people would try to give credit to George W. Bush. I mean, so yes, the jobs numbers are good right now. That's great. Do we want to point out that it's a steady increase from the recovery that Obama laid out and from his policies? Do I believe the predictions of economists that some of Trump's economic policies, the few he's managed to get through, including the tax breaks, will ultimately hurt jobs in the American people? Yes. Most of the companies that got those breaks didn't end up doing the hiring they promised they would do. They just pocketed it. I mean, he's... But as you said, time will tell. Time will tell. And I continue to be worried. What I'm most worried about is the way that he is fomenting hate and division in our country.
I don't think he's fomenting hate. I think he's fighting back against people.
Talk to a Muslim. Talk to one of those immigrant kids who've still been separated from their families.
But they were separated under Obama too.
Who are blaming immigrants for the problems in our economy? That, you know what? I'd love to blame instead on Washington. Let's blame Washington, but don't blame immigrants.
No, look. The separating of families is I think that's a bit of a cop-out, Sally. Come on, you know that. That was being done under Obama. Trump was the guy who said, look, the laws are the laws. Congress fixed the laws. And then he passed an executive order anyway, trying to reunite them. So, I mean, come on.
Oh, my God, Carl, really? So you're going to say it wasn't his administration, his policy that started not only detaining families at the border, but actually keeping kids separate from their parents. You're gonna try to pretend that was
he enforced the law and told policy. Congress to fix it, and they didn't do it. A Republican Congress, mind you, that I'm blaming.
Carl, man, we're gonna have to So you're horrified by a policy that it's and that's the other thing is if you're a real leader, if you're a real bold leader, look, when Obama was president, had a very aggressive deportation strategy, and
Yeah.
I was against it, and I opposed him, and I supported Obama.
Yeah.
And I was one of the people who called him deporter in chief, right? Like it was abominable. And he did it for political reasons because he thought if he was aggressive with deportations, then he'd have more leverage with Republicans to get immigration reform. And I get it, but it was horrible and awful and abysmal. And I feel like, as an American, that's my job to be able to say so.
Okay.
So
At what point do you?
You can point to whatever sequence of whatever, but that happened because of Trump.
I don't.
Took little kids from their parents' arms. That was him. It wasn't anybody else.
It was the law,
I mean,
and that's
like,
the president's job is to
hold him accountable.
enforce the law. At what point, though, do you blame? Did you not? I mean, you can't blame a president for enforcing laws to protect a country on immigration, and then at the same time, and not hold the families accountable who came here illegally. I mean, they came here illegally. It's their responsibility. Had they have not done that, they wouldn't have
First
to.
of all,
deal
many
with
are
it.
asylum seekers, but he's also changed that process. Number one. Number two, the idea the language you just used, to protect our country from immigration. This is a country, as
Illegal
you yourself
immigration.
pointed out. As you yourself pointed out, a country founded on immigration. By the way, I'd also like to point out that when my ancestors came here, we didn't have quotas or law. You just arrived, and there were no quotas. There was no line. There was no bound. Right. So this sort of mythology that we once had, quote unquote, legal immigration, we didn't even have immigration laws.
Unregulated
and quotas
immigration
until
is not good.
1946. We didn't regulate. Right. But my point is, and regardless, tearing kids, when people are coming from countries that are, whether it's in Central America where they're facing unprecedented levels of violence and coming to seek asylum, or whether it's in Mexico where, by the way, their jobs have been ruined more than our jobs by NAFTA, a policy that supposedly the president is against and supposedly understands the implications of, and people are showing up, as they always have, in the greatest country in the world, as you say, looking for help. And what we do is tear 2-year-old and 3-year-old kids away from their parents and put them in cages for months.
Talking point.
I'm sorry,
Talking
that is
point.
not. But it's true. It's true, Carl. Don't you care? I mean, don't you want to know the truth?
What I want to, I hold the parents accountable who took their kids here. That's who I hold accountable, not Trump. Trump is following the laws that was passed under a different administration by a Congress that, I mean, I think that, like, that's the difference in our opinion, is that it sucks. I'd rather it not happen, but I'd also so to some effect, you can't justify the level of lawlessness with the level of need or the level of desire. Because look, I really desire $1 billion. Does that justify me robbing a bank? No. So they should. There are processes and staples to come here legally, and you cannot have unregulated immigration when you have a president like Trump who's upholding the law. It's not like he made new laws; he upheld the law.
But let's talk about but you have a choice when you enforce laws, how you do so, and whether you do so humanely. So if you're robbing a bank or I'm jaywalking, and we're caught, we put our arms up and go peacefully, and the police were to nonetheless beat us with a bully stick, I would hope you would think that's wrong.
There's not, of course it's wrong, but they're not.
Right,
nobody's
but
beating anybody with sticks. They're.
You can humanely enforce laws, and you can do so in ways that are deliberately punitive. What have been called. You can. If you want to, again, we have a long history in this country of enforcing immigration laws as well, and at least since they existed, in recent history, and doing so humanely. It's just, this one to me feels pretty straightforward. You don't.
Yeah. Well, you and I are going
to detain families. That's what they're doing now, right? They're detaining people as families.
I'd prefer that. Not what the law is, but I prefer that. I hate the fact that, look, I have kids myself. I hate the fact of an idea of a parent and a kid getting separated, but I also hate the fact that somebody is willing to break our laws to come here and disrespect our country. We're going to agree to disagree on this, Sally. How can your book, Opposite of Hate, where can people get it?
Well, let me just say one other thing, Carl. I respect that we disagree.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to know if for whatever reason you ever felt you had to flee your home, your state, your country because of violence, the abject poverty, and chose to make that decision, heartbreaking and difficult as I can only imagine would be, I want you to know, I would not just support, I would fight for your ability to be able to do so. You can be turned away. That's fair too. But, as a parent, I also can imagine a situation where I would have to, my kid's been reading about the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think about in that situation, in that moment, what would I do? We're Jewish. What would I do to protect my kid, to protect my family? What laws wouldn't I break? What boundaries wouldn't I push?
That's
and
a
again,
different situation, though.
Different. My point is, I would fight for your free. If we're talking about freedom, right? If we are a country that stands for freedom, and a country historically that stood for freedom of those who were not yet here, right? A country that was built, again, as we talked about, in complicated ways, because we also are a country that was built in many ways on the unfreedom of many. But I'm just saying, I'd like to see us stand for that consistently, even when it's hard.
You know what? Build the wall, put the big golden door in the wall, and let them come through legally on terms that are beneficial to the United States of America. Nobody is owed citizenship, asylum, or any type of residency here in America. It is something that we are very fortunate to have it as Americans who are born here, but it is not owed to people. And it sucks that some people have terrible situations, but it should not be a right to come to. It is not a right to come to the United States of America.
It's not a right. The only difference is, when my ancestors came, it was because their circumstances sucked. And they saw this country as a beacon of freedom and hope and opportunity. And that's always what I thought made this country great.
Yeah.
Regardless, great conversation. And people can get The Opposite Hate on Amazon or their independent bookstores or wherever books are sold, blah, blah, blah.
Is it on audiobook?
Always love talking to you. There's an audiobook, yes.
I'm actually gonna order it.
Are you going to listen to it on audiobook?
I will actually listen to it on audiobook during my workouts.
I'll enjoy our quality time together.
My workout is my time to catch up on stuff like that, and I'm sure there'll be things in there that will annoy me to motivate me. But I will order you. I promise I will order it in audiobook, so everybody else should too. It's good to see both sides of the equation. Sally, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate the time. I know we went longer than we thought, but this is
it was good discussion.
This is what America's about: is having a free and clear discussion, civil enough to have cocktails after.
I hope so.
All right, Sally. We'll talk to you soon.
Nice talking to you. Bye.
So make sure you follow us on Twitter at Carl Higbee. Make sure you follow Sally Kohn. I think she's just Sally Kohn. At least she is on Instagram. But thanks so much for tuning in, folks. This is how conversations are supposed to be. We are civil. We disagree on plenty. We let each other talk. We don't shout each other down. And we don't ridicule each other. Thanks for tuning in, guys. This is the Carl Higbee Show. Talk to you next time.